A bather is seated at the edge of a pool. Behind her, a woman playing the castanets is dancing to the rhythm of a Turkish tambourine, the def. Still other women who are reclining on red sofas are drinking or eating. 3 of them are teasing another woman. The one on the right is tickling her with a small stick. A tall bather is walking toward the background. She's wearing a yellow headdress. A young woman standing is perfuming the hair of a blonde who is seated with her arms crossed. Near them, 2 friends press against each other. A third is lying on her side, her arms under her head. A fourth is hiding her eyes with her hand. In the foreground, there is a low, small table with pots, fruits, a coffee cup, and a saucer. Near the table are some vases. Finally, the principal subject, seen from the back, is a musician who is playing the zas, a type of Turkish lute. When the painting is unframed, it is revealed to be in the form of a circle or tondo within a square canvas 1 meter 10 centimeters on a side. The corners are covered over with a layer of white paint, and beneath them are visible traces of a rectangular composition. The canvas was glued onto a plywood panel which was later strengthened with a parquet reinforcement. At the bottom of the painting, an inscription in Latin reads, J. Ingres painted it in 1862 in his 82nd year. A painter of history, a portraitist, all his life Ingres was also haunted by the nude figure, especially the female nude. He scarcely liked the study of anatomy and was interested only in full and living forms, never hesitating to distort one detail or another. In 1807 at Rome, Ingres painted the half-length bather. A nude woman is viewed from the back. Her arm held slightly away from her bust permits a glimpse of her left breast. Her hair is wrapped in a knotted turban. The following year, he returned to this theme. The Valpinçon bather, named for his first landlady, is seated on a bed. She also is wearing a turban. And just perceptible at her feet are water and a basin. The scene is bordered with a curtain. In 1814, while still in Rome, Ingres painted the Grand Odalisque. Included among various Oriental accessories is once again the turban. As in the previous work, a slightly open arm reveals a glimpse of the breast, and a blue curtain closes the composition. Roger delivering Angelica illustrates the theme of the epic poem Orlando Furioso by Ludovico Ariosto. From a study using a model, to the first interpretations, and then to the final image, body hair and a realistic rendering of the genitals disappeared. Ingres painted several versions of the scene. Ingres worked on the birth of Venus for 40 years. He reused the same silhouette in La Source, a canvas that he perfected for more than 30 years. Here also, the female genitals are painted smooth as they are in classical sculpture and painting. In Odalisque with Slave, the undulating form of the reclining concubine contrasts with the network of horizontals and verticals. The painting had been preceded by a sketch. 3 years later, Ingres painted a replica of it with variations. In 1826, Ingres resumed the theme of the bather in The Little Bather, or Interior of a Harem. Women are now visible around the pool. He will come back to this theme several times, recapturing it in a charcoal drawing or a watercolor. A plate engraved by Etienne Rêvé in 1851 to capture Ingres' work no longer shows a bed, but an Oriental-style stool, and in the background, various female figures who will show up later in the Turkish Bath. Thus, there must have been yet another version, perhaps the last one before the final Turkish Bath. The Turkish Bath was commissioned by Prince Napoleon, the son of the former King Jerome Bonaparte, for his apartments in the royal palace. It was delivered by Ingres at the end of 1859. A part of the work was photographed under the artist's direction. And a negative exists showing a rectangular Turkish bath. It is dated 1859. Perhaps it shows the painting sold to Prince Napoleon. It shows the back of a bather inspired by the Valpinçon bather, as well as the pool, the turban, and the curtain. But what's much more important is the number of people. The prince's wife, Princess Clotilde, would have been shocked by this abundance of nudity. Thus the canvas was returned to the painter, who the following spring gave the prince in exchange his youthful self-portrait, which Ingres had kept in his possession for 56 years. After taking back the Turkish bath, Ingres transformed it, giving it the form in which it is known today. Delacroix had been fascinated with the Orient. He had even traveled to the country of Maghreb. Ingres also felt this fascination, but never traveled there. But he did transcribe an extract by a famous letter writer, Lady Mary Montagu, telling about her visit to a women's bath at Adrianople. She wrote, "There were at least 200 bathers there. The sofas were covered with cushions and rich tapestries. The women positioned there with slaves dressing their hair were all in a natural state, completely nude. However, there were among them neither indecent movements nor lascivious postures. They walked and moved with majestic grace. Several of them were well shaped with dazzling white skin, and they were adorned only by their hair, which had been combed into tresses that fell to their shoulders, and were dressed with pearls and ribbons. Beautiful nude women in different postures, some gossiping, some working, others taking coffee or sorbet, and still others casually reclining on their cushions." Throughout his life, Ingres amassed images, scholarly or popular prints, copies of paintings, fragments of decorations, pages of catalogs, illustrations from magazines or books cut out with scissors. The painter spread them around him, separating those that interested him for integration into his sketches. But they formed no simple collage. He then used them to pose his models and in this way prepared his initial drawings. Le Coucher à l'Italienne, a painting by Jacob van Loo, painted in the mid-17th century, is today in the Museum of Lyon. Perhaps Ingres had seen it. He did possess a print of it. The pose and the flesh tint of the model influenced those of the Valpinçon bather. And it was the Valpinçon bather that he returned to a half-century later in the central subject of the Turkish bath. Among the many engravings that Ingres possessed, his file on the Orient was considerable: architecture, people, accessories, decorative motifs. Several were copied by him and then recopied and integrated into his paintings. A Jewish woman in ceremonial dress. She is undressed and included in the engraved version by Rêvé and then among the people in the background of the Turkish bath. But Ingres changed the position of her right hand. He took the gesture from a Pompeian painting titled Hercules and Telephus, which he had one of his students copy and which he had already used for the portrait of Madame Wattesier. Turkish girl whose hair is braided at the bath. The engraving is taken just as it is in The Little Bather. It is the source of various drawings that would end up as the group of women doing their hair in the Turkish bath. Girl playing the zas. She inspired the musician in the Odalisque with slave and the gesture of the bather seen from the back in the Turkish bath. Turkish girl dancing before her master. She was placed in a little square by Ingres, who undressed her and modified the position of her arms. She appeared in the engraving by Revet, in the watercolor by Bayon, and then in the Turkish bath. The black musician with the tambourine on the left in this same print was also copied and then inverted, thus becoming left-handed. Turk going to the bath. She is taken up in the center of the Turkish bath, but half undressed. Her servant now precedes her in the frame of the door with a vase on her head covered with a canopy of red cloth. Turkish woman who is reclining on a sofa having come out of the bath. Ingres undressed her, put her in a square, and enlarged her. Then he must have had his first wife, Madeleine Chapelle, pose in this way because it is her face that is found in a sketch in oil on paper. Later, he modified the position of her right arm and carried this sketch into the Turkish bath. When he realized his Turkish bath toward the end of his life, Ingres used no model. It was sufficient to assemble all his studies, copies, or drawings accumulated in cartons over the decades. To drawings inspired directly by engravings, he added other studies: women's heads and arms, crossed legs, reclining nudes, or nude seated in different positions. In The Vow of Louis XIII, hanging today in the Cathedral of Montauban, Ingres painted an angel. After having copied it, he reused its face in several other paintings and also as one of the people on the right in the Turkish bath. The drawing of the reclining woman with her hands on her torso, taken for one of the background people, can be dated. In fact, it is included in a series of preparatory drawings for the Golden Age. This series carries the name of the model, Mariette, and her address, 42 Rue Saint-André-des-Arcs. Therefore, the drawing was done in Paris after May 1841, on Ingres' return from his second sojourn in Rome. The preparatory drawing of the group at left is much later. In effect, it shows the curve of the final tondo executed after 1860, when Ingres had taken his canvas back from Prince Napoleon and transformed the rectangular composition into a circular one. There is no study for the ensemble in the Turkish bath in existence, only a few drawings putting groups of people into place. A laboratory analysis enables us to understand today how Ingres was able to develop his painting. The canvas was attached to the wood with the help of a glue that had a white lead base. The white lead screened out the X-rays so that the painting cannot be analyzed in detail. However, radiography shows that the painting was composed of 3 sections. A small rectangular part. Traces of folds prove that this first canvas was at first mounted on a frame. This part is framed by a second part, the one on which can be seen the angles under the whitened sections of the final canvas. Finally, the composition was again enlarged in order to achieve a square of 1 meter 10 centimeters on a side. Some samples were taken by the Louvre's laboratory from the corners covered by white paint. They showed that in one, under the white coat that whitewashed the surface, was a blue-green coat of paint. In two, only a coat of gray. Compared to the photograph, the one position corresponds to a curtain, the two position to the gray wall of the background. In the lower right-hand corner, sample 3 showed a coat of white and then a thick coat of rose-colored flesh. Going back to the photograph, sample 3 corresponds to the calf of the bather reclining in the foreground. Thus it is possible to follow the revisions that Ingres made to his painting. First, it existed in the form of a rectangular canvas. This first composition was perhaps centered on the player of the Zas. Thus, the bather on the right could not have been part of the composition. The second state was the larger rectangular form shown in the photograph. However, this painting is slightly larger than the canvas that appears in the second position in the radiography. Thus, the rectangular painting photographed in 1859 was then cut back a second time by Ingres. The portion eliminated on the right enabled him to completely redo the bather's arms. The artist then added bands of canvas to achieve the square in which he could finally position the circle. In the new organization of the canvas, the woman reclining in the foreground is reduced. A still life takes the place of her knee. The position of the bather's arms on the right is modified. On the left, a bather comes to occupy the edge of the pool and fills a void in the composition. The background is transformed and slightly darkened. At the left, the curtain disappears. A group of women fills the void next to the dancer. These successive and complex revisions of the Turkish bath thus come to an end in a circular image or tondo, a frequent shape in Italian Renaissance painting, Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Signorelli, Michelangelo, Raphael. Often the shapes themselves are determined by the circle. In his final development of the figures in the Turkish bath, Ingres proceeded perhaps in the same way. The arms and bodies of the bathers in the foreground outlined circles toward the top. The women's bodies determine curves and counter-curves that unfold, brush against each other, and sometimes become confused according to a succession of undulating rhythms. The objects themselves seem to respond to these curves. Only a few straight lines indicate a very stylized decor. Niches, a door, edge of the table, pool. The perspective in the foreground is contracted, producing the effect of a convex mirror frequently seen in the tondi of the Renaissance painters. This optical distortion accentuates the eroticism of the scene, which seems seen through a peephole or a skylight. A beam of light comes from high up and falls on the turban and shoulder of the musician playing the Zas. The range of brightness is very wide, from white yellow to black brown. 25 nude women are assembled, a way for the painter to humorously respond to one of the principal pictorial problems in the history of painting, the depiction of flesh. Profiting from the mixture of races among the captives in the harem, Ingres voluptuously exhausts the gamut of skin color, from ivory to black, passing through rose and copper. A few touches of color are added for flesh tints: the lips, cheeks, the tips of the breasts. After having transformed his canvas, Ingres resold it in 1865 to Khalil Bey, former Turkish ambassador to St. Petersburg, who was residing in Paris and who doted on this genre of composition. The following year, Khalil Bey bought from Gustave Courbet a small painting, The Origin of the World, a sort of obscene antithesis to Ingres' smooth nudes, and a very large painting, The Sleepers, which even more frankly approached the lesbian theme already present in the Turkish Bath. Put up for bidding in 1868, the Turkish Bath passed through various collections. It was acquired in 1911 by the Louvre and evoked as much repulsion as fascination. The brothers Concours, art critics and journalists, agreed, "There in this ancient bath a melee of mannequin-like bodies with caricaturish disproportions, an assemblage of female savages from Tierra del Fuego, gingerbread cutouts." Writer-diplomat Paul Claudel said, "A canvas by this unhappy painter called Ingres, where one sees a mass of females compressed one against the other like a cake of maggots." Dr. Leniel Lavastine analyzed the painting. Ingres' women show all the objective symptomatology of thyroidal insufficiency, overdeveloped neck, thyroid with two prominent and hypertrophic lobes, a passive and slightly weakened gentleness, and a face with full cheeks. Ingres' bathers and the Turkish bath were often imitated. For painters specializing in the Orient, the ancient and Arab-like decor was often a pretext for painting scenes of lascivious nudes for rich prospective buyers. Photographers also drew plastic models from Ingres. As early as 1850, Eugène Durieux, who worked for Delacroix, was inspired by the Valpensant bather. The woman in the bath has remained a universal theme. In this celebrated photograph, Violon d'Ingres, Man Ray combined the painter of sumptuous nudes and the violinist whose passion had become proverbial. It is possible to imagine the music of the Turkish bath. The player of the deaf imposes her rhythm. The castanets of the dancer join in with it. Several women follow the rhythm by clapping their hands. The player of the zas embroiders these percussions with a classical air, and one of the women, the most gifted, improvises a love song. Rhythms, melody, and songs finish submerged in the traditional ululations. But the exact Oriental reconstitution was not Ingres' intention. For him, the harem was the ultimate sensual delirium. Everywhere, the folds and creases of flesh hide as much as they reveal. One woman is in ecstasy. Another greedily swallows a candy. Another ostentatiously shows her plump buttocks and her erect breasts at the same time. The lascivious bather at the edge of the pool caresses her shoulder with her cheek. The women in the group on the right are delighting in each other. A hand caresses a breast, but does it belong to one or the other of the two friends? Behind the orgy of living flesh in the Turkish bath may be guessed a crowd of real people. First, the models who, like Mariette, posed for him during his youth, languished, offered, and caressed by the pencil or the brush, and other women as well. Listlessly seated, stomach and breasts forward, veiled but wide apart thighs, this woman strikes the same pose as Madame Wattissier. And what if it was Madame Wattissier herself? The beautiful blonde who observes the scene indifferently is Adèle de L'Oréal, with whom Ingres was in love in Rome and who introduced Madeleine Chapelle to him, her cousin, whom he married. The plump and soft, indolent woman in the foreground is Madeleine, the painter's first wife, sketched around 1815 in Rome at the moment of her carnal splendor. And the girl in the Arab headdress, with her chestnut hair bound by a headband, slightly resembles Delphine Ramel, the painter's second wife. Perhaps there's even more to see in this final painting. The old man exchanged his youthful self-portrait for his scandalous canvas. He cuts it back and reshapes it to give it a form that religious paintings once had, but the Turkish Bath gives witness to a whole new cult. Having reached the summit of his glory, the respectable painter had nothing to lose. At the approach of death, veils fall. In the old painter's memory, all the women, loved or admired, possessed or not, still living or long dead, are painted nude and lasciviously mingled. The only mystery in the center is the bather with the hidden face. It is as if the simple naked back were the secret thread of a dream pursued throughout a lifetime. Perhaps there's nothing more to the origin of this painted image than that of an unequivocal invitation, and an unceasingly renewed desire that in the long run, only the painting could satisfy.